Story 1. Swerved to avoid a deer at full speed. The car flipped twice. Walked out with just a scratch. Still do not know how. Story 2. Almost exactly a year ago, I blacked out while drinking for the first time and woke up 12 hours later in the hospital covered in injuries, with my bag and glasses missing. I still do not know what happened. The hospital refused to process the incident as a violent crime, so there were no forensic investigations, even though they asked if I wanted my injuries photographed and I said yes. Honestly, there is a lot I could be angry about regarding the incident, but overall I have to say that I am very lucky to be alive. Story 3. While hungover, I crossed a street and felt a tap on my shoulder. It was a truck that had braked just in time. Story 4. One morning, as I was about to get up for the day, my girlfriend asked me if I felt like being late to work that day. I decided that being late for work was a great idea. When we had gotten ready and left to start a day of gainful employment, we walked to her work and discovered a car had gone through the bus stop where I usually caught the bus to work. The lady who was at the bus stop died in the accident. Story 5. I was grabbed by a stranger when I was 4 years old. If not for the cashier, I would have disappeared. The man who grabbed me was a child molester. Story 6. My heart stopped from a fentanyl overdose 13 years ago. I would be dead if naloxone and cardiopulmonary resuscitation did not exist. That is when I quit using opioids. Story 7. Almost drowned twice, rolled a car, crashed into a tree, survived a brain tumor, and stuck my finger in a light bulb socket as a kid. Story 8. I woke from a 7-day coma after a suicide attempt, and I recall very clearly that I did not want to die. Story 9. I fell on a 10-inch steak knife when I was 8. It went all the way in and missed my heart by no more than an inch. Story 10. When I was less than 6 months old, maybe a little older, my parents were involved in 2 separate car accidents with me. Both times, one parent was driving the car, unbuckled in the rain, going around a sharp turn and landed in a ditch upside down, 2 separate ditches. I was completely unharmed because I was fully buckled in. They both only got bruises and scratches, no broken bones, and no severe head trauma. Our angels were really looking out for us those nights. Story 11. Got cancer at 14 and they did not catch it until stage 3, just before it started to spread to the brain. I was one of 2 people in the children's oncology ward for my first set of treatments and, as I discovered in 2012, the only one left alive. I think about the person I shared the ward with often and wonder why I am still here and they are not. Story 12. When I was a teenager, I was cornered alone in a hotel hot tub room by a man who was on a cellular phone. This happened in San Antonio, Texas. He did not say anything, only watched me and listened to whoever was on the other end. I got extremely lucky because a college-aged man noticed how suspicious the man looked following me into the room. He joined me until the creepy man left. I sometimes think about how dangerous that situation could have been for me. Story 13. When I was younger, maybe around 10 years old, we had a pool in our backyard. It was an above-ground pool, about 4 feet deep. I thought it would be a good idea to dive into it from the 6-foot fence. I dove deep and hit the bottom hard. My hands did not protect me, and my head struck the bottom. I felt incredible pain shoot down my spine. I walked out, sat down, and knew I was very lucky. Story 14. At 15, it was 4 a.m. I was in a car in the passenger seat with a friend of the same age driving. I got shot in the lower back. It didn't hit any organ. The bullet landed 1 inch from my spine. I could feel it under my skin and even touched it like a small pimple. I didn't realize it was a bullet at that time and walked home for 3 minutes, not feeling any pain at all. I woke my mother up, telling her I didn't know what was in my back and that we needed to go to the hospital. 10 minutes later, at the emergency room, they said it was a bullet. I was still in shock, texting my friends and posting on Facebook. There was no Instagram or Snapchat then. Story 15. When I was 5 years old, I was playing outside alone and got run over by a car. I still remember the driver had his elderly mother with him, and she was angry and anxious, crying and slapping his shoulder, asking why he didn't see me. I was completely okay with no broken bones or injuries, but the tire tracks were visible on my skin for a day or two. The emotional impact on the driver and my family was understandably significant. Story 16. Surviving Hurricane Helene. Power was knocked out for a whole week, but on the bright side, I got a new kitten out of it. Story 17. When I was a little kid, my dad took me to Toys R Us in his old Trans Am. The parking lot is on a really high hill with a slight slant. At the bottom of the hill is a massive intersection with non-stop traffic. My dad parked his Trans Am, put the parking brake on, got out, and walked around the front of the car over to my side to get me out of my seat. The parking brake snapped while he was walking around, and the car started rolling down the parking lot toward the hill where the intersection was. It hopped the curb and hit the only bush in the area. The bush barely stopped the car. Otherwise, I would have rolled down a really steep hill into the middle of the intersection and surely would have been killed. I'll never forget the absolute look of fear and panic in my dad's eyes. Story 18. 3 weeks ago, someone broke into my sister's house and killed her. Someone shot her 3 times in the back. We do not know why this happened or who did it. It happened on May 16, 2026 at 11 a.m., and that day I was planning to visit her because she was sad due to some problems with her husband. I was doing some things related to a house that I bought, and then I wanted to go to her house. Sometimes I think maybe if I had gone, I could have saved her. Maybe she and I could have fought the attacker, or maybe I would have died and she would have lived. She was only 32 years old and had 4 children. This happened in Mexico. Sorry if my English is not good. Story 19. I couldn't swim but thought it would be fun to relax in a not so deep and slow running part of a river at a friend's birthday party in high school. It was fun until I almost drowned trying to walk across the river. I soon realized that it was actually much deeper than I thought. Friends saved me, and I have not been inside a body of water since. Story 20. I went for a run 12 years ago. An intoxicated driver put me into an 11-and-a-half-day coma in the intensive care unit. I suffered a traumatic brain injury as well as several other injuries. I have not been able to taste or smell anything in over 12 years, along with some other permanent injuries. This incident disrupted the momentum of my life up to that point and caused new stress and heartache. I made an album during recovery. If you are interested, the album 9FM by the artist 9FM is the music I created during that time. A silver lining, I guess. It is streaming everywhere. The first song is called At Deep Water. Enjoy. Story 21. When I was younger and much less wise, my husband and I spent about 6 hours drinking with a friend. Then we had the idea to drive about an hour away to another friend's house, on the interstate in another state at 10 o'clock at night. When we reached the state border, there was a huge accident and traffic was at a standstill. We both fell asleep in the truck on the interstate. We woke up when someone drove by at 90 miles per hour, blaring their horn at us. The road was completely clear. I have no idea how we didn't die. Story 22. Barely survived my own birth because the umbilical cord was around my neck. My mother swears I actually died and was brought back when I was in the hospital for a horrifyingly high fever as a toddler. A tornado destroyed several neighbors' houses when I was 5. Ours was in the direct path but was barely damaged. My whole family probably would have died in a trailer fire when I was 11 if I had not had insomnia and screamed loudly when I saw the fire. The place was fully engulfed very fast. I was involved in a head-on collision with a drunk driver at 21. I was carjacked at 32. That is it so far. Too many. Story 23. Catastrophic stroke in 2017. I was in a coma, and it did not look like I would come out of it. They had the talk with my wife about letting me go. She said no. My wife is my luck. Story 24. Almost 25 years ago, I was a leader in training at a YMCA sleepaway camp in North Georgia. I was either 13 or 14. We had gone camping at a local national forest campground. All the campers and leaders in training were sent to find firewood. I partnered with another girl my age. As we were walking in the woods, we ran into a park ranger. He told us to follow him, saying he knew the best firewood spot about 200 yards down the hill by his cabin. We said, okay. Then he said, oh wait, You have an ant on you. He brushed the girl's chest slowly and clearly inappropriately. He said, "Got it," and told us to follow him. The girl gave me a look I will never forget. It was a clear, "We have to get out of here" look. As the park ranger started walking down the hill ahead of us, I grabbed her hand, and we sprinted up the hill back to the campgrounds and told the counselors. They called the park and had all the park rangers come to the campground. That park ranger did not show up. We described the man, and they said there was no ranger who worked there like that. We told them where we had seen him. The next day, the campgrounds were closed for 2 weeks. I have no idea if they ever found the man or what was in the cabin, but they shut the entire park down for 2 weeks. Story 25. I was traveling home from visiting my parents in November when a whiteout blizzard hit me on the highway. Whiteout conditions started, and 2 semi-trucks had stopped on the road because of accidents ahead. I barely stopped in time and had 2 cars nearly miss me at full speed. One swerved off to the right and clipped my bumper, and the other went left and positioned itself between the 2 semi-trucks. I could have very easily ended up sandwiched between a semi-truck and a truck in the middle of a brutal storm, but thankfully I was able to avoid any accident and get to a rest stop to wait out the storm. Story 26. I got off the light rail in Seattle while wearing headphones and was not paying attention. I stepped onto the tracks of the light rail going in the opposite direction, and it passed by, hitting the tip of my nose. I fell back in complete shock. Story 27. I recently used artificial intelligence to help me correlate a lot of records, notes, and emails about a particular incident that changed my life. I just saw this post, so I asked the artificial intelligence to write a reply for me. This is what it produced, and I have to say, it is not a bad writer this time, and there are no hallucinations in it. I present to you my story, as told by a large language model. My luckiest day was the day I got hit by a car. It is hard to pick just one lucky to be alive moment because my life has been a series of them, unfortunately. But the one that changed everything and almost ended it was a hit-and-run car accident many years ago. I was hit, and the person who did it was never caught. The immediate aftermath was brutal. Multiple broken ribs and the start of chronic, debilitating pain in my neck, back, and shoulders from herniated and bulging discs. But the real game changer was the onset of what I call attacks, which we now suspect are related to vagus nerve dysfunction. These are not just pain flares. They are full-blown physiological meltdowns. They start with excruciating pain in the back of my head, ripping down my spine. The muscles from my skull to my back seize up, contracting with an intensity far beyond anything I could ever do voluntarily. It is an unbelievable, unbearable pain that brings on profuse, uncontrollable sweating, so severe it has led to life-threatening dehydration. I have been rushed by ambulance over 100 times in the last 10 years and spent time in the intensive care unit 3 times because doctors feared my organs would shut down. The adrenaline and cortisol released during these attacks just increased the panic and anxiety, creating a horrifying cycle of suffering. When an attack strikes, I am completely incapacitated. I usually have to drop to the floor, focusing every ounce of my being on distress tolerance techniques and just breathing to get through it. These attacks can last anywhere from a few hours to an agonizing 70 hours. I try to manage them at home now because emergency room visits are so expensive, but it is a constant battle. In addition to this, my second bout of coronavirus disease 2019 left me with severe long coronavirus symptoms, including profound cardiac weakness. My feet swelled tremendously because my heart could not pump fluid effectively, and I still get winded and sweat easily with minimal exertion. Looking back, the fact that I survived the initial accident and all the subsequent medical crises, especially those intensive care unit scares, makes me lucky to be alive. My life is now a continuous, full-time effort managing these conditions, including hours of daily physical therapy just to function. Doctors have told me to expect this for the rest of my life. I used to be deeply depressed and even suicidal about that prognosis, but years of therapy have helped me overcome that, which is honestly my only real improvement. So, while I am grateful to still be here, lucky to be alive, for me means living a life utterly transformed by chronic illness, where every day is a fight for basic function and independence. It is a different kind of luck, I guess. Story 28. I worked at an animal shelter and was mauled by a 90-pound dog. I was by myself and had to scream while fighting for my life. I let the dog have my arm, so I had a fighting chance of staying on my feet and not letting her bring me down to the ground and to my neck. My coworkers finally found me. It took even more time to get the dog off me once I was found because, as the doctors later realized, her tooth was completely stuck inside my bone. It has been compared to shark attacks. It was the first week of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was in the hospital alone on my floor for a week. By the world's luck, they saved my life and both my arms. I have seen multiple specialists since, and they all agree that if I didn't have the doctor on call that night, I would most likely be without my arm and my life altogether. I had both my hands and arms in hard casts for 9 weeks and had to be completely taken care of. It has been almost 5 years. I am permanently disabled, but a whole lot stronger than I ever thought I was or had in me. I took care of and bonded with that dog for 7 months. I have videos cuddling with her in locked cages. She was licking my face 3 minutes before this happened. I have worked with thousands of dogs, and she was the last one I expected to snap. It makes me sad what people did to her before and sad that it led to her demise and almost mine. Finding an excellent post-traumatic stress disorder therapist is a lifesaver. Story 29. As a child, I was trying to open a window to go out onto a flat portion of our roof, which I definitely was not supposed to do. My hand slipped and went through a pane of glass, causing a deep diagonal cut. My mother was asleep at the time because of shift work. Story 30. I drank what I think was bad coffee, which raced through my body, almost kicking me out of the universe. I tried to get paracetamol but could not obtain it, so I went to the hospital. The doctor told the nurse to give me paracetamol. I am still here and being careful now. Story 31. We rolled my cousin's truck 2.5 times. My friend and I were in the bed of the truck when it happened. Every one of us walked away unscathed somehow. Story 32. I was swimming in a wave pool as a kid and got tired. I was holding onto a bar on the side of the pool but got tired of doing that and hooked one arm, then the other, behind me. Once they were in, I was resting well but did not notice I was dangling and could not move or get my arms out. The wave pool started, and the waves were going over my head. I could not shout for help because I could barely get a breath between waves. The lifeguard noticed me and got 4 people to stand one on top of the other to push up on me so I could free my arms. Basically, I was a kid who did things like this a lot. Not sure how I survived being careless and young. Story 33. When I was a young adult, I got my first job at Home Depot. One day, a coworker was bringing down a unit of 2x4 lumber from the overhead rafters. He did not do his safety check, and the blades of the forklift were very close together. When he lifted it off the rack, it slid off his lift and landed a few feet away from me. The safety straps broke, and lumber went everywhere. Somehow, nothing hit me. It felt like I went into slow motion as I watched boards fly in every direction. I went into minor shock for a minute. People ran over to make sure I was okay. But I barely remember anything until they moved me to the break room and got me some water. Story 34. I was in a car accident 6 years ago. I was not driving. I was in the back seat. We were hit from the back and the side. My life flashed before my eyes. Everything happened so fast. The only issue I have now is that my shoulder sometimes bothers me. I did not feel anything after the accident until the next day. Felt like I was beaten with a bat. I was extremely sore. Thank God I was not killed. Story 35. I had a big mortar firework explode right in my face. The tube it was in fell after I lit the fuse and I kept trying to set it up, but it kept falling over. I remember hearing my friend behind me yelling my name. Then I felt a thud. Everything went white, and all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing. It was exactly like being flashbanged in a video game. Then I felt my body being dragged across the ground. My friend ran up, grabbed my ankles, and started dragging me back. Somehow, I escaped with only a chunk of my hair getting burnt. Story 36. 2 incidents. First, driving down the interstate during a storm, which honestly was not too severe, but bad enough. I passed under an overpass, and the on-ramp to the interstate was elevated. Someone trying to enter the on-ramp apparently lost control in the rain and rolled down the hill towards me. They knocked down a light post at the top, sending it flying down as well. The post slammed into the ground ahead of me, causing me to slam on my brakes. I hit the post, but not hard, and stopped just far enough to avoid the car landing on me when it came to rest about 15 to 20 feet behind me. Contrary to most accident stories, if I had braked just a bit quicker, I might have been killed. Second, my ex attempted to murder me after we had sex. Afterward, she said she wanted to massage my back. I lay on my stomach, and she straddled my waist and began. I started feeling sharp pains a couple of times. When I looked back to see what was happening, I saw a knife in her hand and realized what I was feeling. Story 37. Messing around with a telescope in my driveway, a kid came flying around the bend before my house and spun out into my driveway. The car hit me before it came to a stop. My legs were under the car somehow, but I only walked away with some road rash on my knees and a broken telescope. Story 38. I was hit by a drunk driver while sitting at a stoplight. The driver was coming off an off-ramp from the freeway and was going very fast. He hit me dead center in the back of my car so hard it pushed the gas tank into the trunk. The police told me I am still alive because my car had an emergency shutoff valve to the gas tank. Otherwise, my car would have exploded. Also, my car was pushed by the impact into an intersection of 4 lanes of traffic, which I would have plowed through multiple cars if the lights had not all been red. Story 39. I was 16 or 17 at an underage party when the police showed up to break it up. While everyone else was downstairs giving their names and parents' phone numbers, I was hiding upstairs trying to figure out how to escape because I had an active warrant. I saw an open window and decided to go out there and sit on the roof, thinking it was a perfect hiding spot. As I sat down, I realized the roof was more slanted than I had thought, and it was metal, not shingles. I was wearing silky leggings, which started to slip. I had the choice to either climb back in and get arrested or take a chance and jump or slide off the second-story roof into the pitch-black ground below in the countryside. Being a teenager with nothing to lose, I chose freedom. I closed my eyes and slid down the roof like one of those old metal slides at the playground. I was a ballerina throughout school, so my body reacted instinctively. I hit the ground, tucked and rolled feet, knees, hands, tumble. I tumbled a few times like a tumbleweed. An acquaintance was climbing out the first-story window and watched the whole thing. He froze in shock halfway out the window, and I had to say, "Let's go," to snap him out of it. We barely knew each other but ran through the woods to the main road. I called my mother, who always said she would pick me up with no questions asked if I needed a ride home. She came to get us, and I drove my new friend home the next morning. I realized I had left my purse at the party, so I went back to retrieve it. I decided to check out the backyard in the daylight just for fun. The backyard was full of rusty junk, old farm equipment, a broken washer and dryer, metal and glass shards, gardening tools, and random scraps. Below the window and roof where I had jumped, there was one small patch of grass, exactly the width of a person and the length of a few somersaults. A few inches either way, and I would have been seriously injured or impaled. I knew I was lucky to be alive and felt meant to be in this universe. Story 40. Just over a week ago, I fell into septic shock and went to the hospital by ambulance. I spent 5 days there and am now home. It was caused by a lung infection that entered my bloodstream. At first, I started shaking uncontrollably and slid off my chair onto the floor, unable to move. I did not see it coming. I feel lucky to be alive right now. Story 41. Nearly blown off near the summit of Mount Snowdon. Nearly blown into the barrier while driving 60 miles per hour on a dual carriageway in high winds. Skidded on black ice driving 40 miles per hour. Plus 1 or 2 other near misses. Stared death in the eyes and said, "Not today," a few times recently. Lucky, though? Well, that's up for interpretation. Story 42. I used a trim router freehand on a piece of furniture I was building as a hobby. The router suddenly slipped on the wood and threw itself directly at my stomach. Luckily, it caught on my t-shirt, got tangled, and eventually stopped turning, leaving only a scratch on my lower chest. I was alone in the workshop and considered myself lucky that day. Story 43. My ex-husband pulled a shotgun out during one of the many fights I had tried hard to avoid. I pretended to be asleep when he came home from the bar to avoid engaging with him. He was drunk, angry at the world, and liked to take it out on me. I did not think I would live through the night. October 2004. I will never forget it. Story 44. In February of 2022, I attempted suicide by what I thought was a sure thing. I shot myself point blank in the head with my 9mm handgun. Emergency medical services responded quickly, and through their effective and speedy care, along with the treatment I received at the hospitals that followed, I survived. I was awake and alert enough to participate in therapies during my hospital stay, but I have no memory of any of it until the day of my discharge. I worked with speech, occupational, and physical therapy one last time to be cleared for release, and then I was sent home. Surviving such a traumatic event made me value life more and renewed my resolve against suicide. Never again, no question about it. Story 45. I was on a school bus that lost its brakes and went off a mountain road. I switched seats just before we left with the person sitting next to me. She is now a paraplegic. The person sitting in front of me was one of the 7 who died. My guardian angel was working overtime that day. Story 46. Coming back from Mother's Day brunch about 3 years ago, we went to a restaurant about 20 miles outside town, up through the mountains. It was a beautiful, sunny day. We took a walk around the restaurant property, which is along a small river and features topiaries and other scenery to enjoy. About 5 minutes into our return trip home, it suddenly started dumping hail to the point where the windshield wipers were maxed out and it was still hard to see. My stepfather is not known for being a great driver. He was going too fast into a corner. All 4 tires on his old car broke loose, and the next thing I knew, we were sideways in oncoming traffic, doing about 60 miles per hour. A Ford F-250 and another large pickup truck had to swerve to avoid us. Somehow, he managed to recover, and now we were sliding sideways in the other direction, into the ditch on the side of the road we originally came from. He corrected again, almost back into traffic. He corrected once more, and we were back on the road headed home. I remember silently staring at the oncoming trucks, just assuming that was it. Story 47. Mid-1990s. We were driving on the German highways just before Christmas, and the weather worsened. The road conditions also deteriorated. It started getting slippery. At one point, our car lost grip, and we began to swerve. I was riding shotgun and remember looking at my dad with an expression of shock. Then I looked out the window and saw a large truck heading straight toward us as we slid across the highway. At the last second, our car slid away just before the truck, and we landed in the ditch. Everyone was safe. Story 48. I was diagnosed with cancer at age 14, but it was not detected until stage 3, just before it could spread to the brain. I was one of 2 patients in the children's oncology ward during my initial treatments. As I discovered in 2012, I am the only one still alive. I often think about the person I shared the ward with and wonder why I am still here while he is not. Story 49. I was sitting in a leg press machine between sets. For those familiar, the weight is above you, and you have to unlock the handles to release it. I had it loaded with a few hundred pounds and didn't have my feet on it when somebody fell into the machine, unlocked the holds, and it almost came down. I was going for a 1-rep max, so it was a considerable amount of weight. I don't even know how they fell the way they did. I'm sure more modern machines don't release the weight so easily, but it would have crashed into my midsection with my legs down. I didn't know the person. Otherwise, I would have thought it was intentional based on how their hands hit the release handles. Story 50. Driving down a curvy road by the river in the rain, I was in a hurry to get to work and decided to pass a slow-moving car in front of me. I sped up, went around, and lost control of the vehicle. Fortunately, it was on the opposite side of the river. If the curve had gone the other way, I would have crashed right into the river. Still scares me. Story 51. Went out drinking and got spectacularly drunk. I got the train home and needed to be sick. I crossed the platform to throw up on the tracks. As I was being sick, someone pulled me back, and a couple of seconds later an express train went through at 125 miles per hour right where my head would have been. I was very ill due to coronavirus disease. I was put in an induced coma and my family had to do the 2 a.m. rush to the hospital because they did not think I was going to last the night. Story 52. Got hit by a car going over 55 miles per hour at 10 years old and managed not to have any broken bones. Just some road rash, a bitten tongue, and a minor concussion. Story 53. Going down a cargo net into a landing boat. It was a rough day. About halfway down, I realized I was in the trough between my ship and the boat. The net was pulled tight, and I dropped about 6 feet to the deck. I hit the deck as the boat slammed into the ship. Even with the rubber fenders on the landing boat, I would have been dead. Story 54. I was crossing the highway on a foggy morning when a speeding tractor trailer broke through the fog and T-boned me on the passenger side. Thankfully, or I would not have survived. The entire interior of my car, except for my seat, was destroyed. I remember thinking, I need to put my car in park. I grabbed the shifter, and it just came off the car into my hand. My glasses were blown off my face but did not have a scratch on them. One of my shoes came off. I was injured quite badly. I had to relearn to use my left leg and had a nasty tear on my left bicep muscle. It was like a bulge in my arm but not an open wound. Being thankful was an understatement. I had just replaced my entire windshield the week before the accident, and it was a nearly brand new vehicle. I was also very thankful for the gap insurance I purchased when buying it. Story 55. I was riding in a dune buggy a friend of mine had just bought when the brakes completely failed. We went through a red traffic light with cars passing by at high speed. Somehow, we avoided all collisions and came out without a scratch. I thought I was going to die. Story 56. 1. Mom had a psychotic moment and tried suffocating my sister and me, saying she was going to kill us both and then herself. 2. Driving when I was 19 and almost hitting a bus, going 70 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. I was a hair away from completely hitting it and probably would have died in my compact junker. 3. Guns were pulled on me and I was shot at a few times. The scariest was a guy breaking in and pointing a gun at my chest. I talked him out of shooting me while seeing in his face that he wanted to and was drugged out. 4. A great white shark breached on me in Central California while surfing alone at sunset in the middle of nowhere. A 12-foot shadow came up in front of me and crashed down next to me. I am sure it was thinking of eating me but checking things out first. 5. In Indonesia on a small boat, hitting a reef and then getting pushed around in 10 to 15-foot surf without capsizing in the middle of nowhere in Sumatra. 6. Almost taking my own life due to depression because my divorce was ugly and my mental health was never good. 7. A man walked up to me in the middle of the night in Beirut, acting like he was going to rob or stab me, all aggressive, then suddenly stopped as he got close and walked in the other direction. He looked angry and crazy. It was not a safe time to be there for Americans either. There are probably more. I cannot remember them all. Story 57. About 10 years old, my brothers, my mom, and a family friend were playing at the spill piles near a closed-down strip mining facility. At one point, I was climbing up the pile while my older brother and a friend were trying to push a large boulder down the hill. It was not directly in front of me, so I did not worry much. But then it got going, accelerated, and after one large hop, it bounced off another boulder and dropped into the crevice I was climbing through at full speed. I was stuck. I was halfway up the pile, and the crevice was about 6 feet deep. I looked left but could not climb out. I looked right but could not climb out. I was afraid to turn around because I thought it would break my back. So I stood there, bracing myself, waiting for my doom, the boulder bouncing down the crevice coming quickly at me. Just before it reached me, it bounded up and hit me full force right in the chest. I cartwheeled all the way down the hill to the surface below, crawled a few feet, turned on my back, and went to sleep. I woke up with my mom shaking my chest and telling me to wake up. I felt like I still could not breathe, like someone was sitting on me. So I backed up a bit, sat up, and took a seat on a boulder while I gathered myself. The boulder was as big as my entire torso. I took the full force directly in the chest, and honestly, if it had hit me any other way, I think I would have been seriously hurt. Somehow, I did not even get a bruise. Story 58. Fainting on the ground while going to the bathroom. Please bear with me. One day in September 2022, it was like any ordinary day. By 8 p.m., I started to faint. I thought I was hungry. I ate, then vomited, and kept fainting. I got clammy and cold. I did not know what was wrong, but I thought maybe I was dehydrated and weak, so I was going to sleep it off. I had the urge to use the restroom, so I got up and fell to the floor again. That is when I realized I needed to go to the emergency room. I ended up losing consciousness on the toilet, and emergency services were called. I went into shock and had internal bleeding from a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. I believe that if I had not gotten up and tried to go to the bathroom, I would most likely have died in my sleep. Story 59. First, an older horse I was riding died suddenly mid-gallop, probably from a heart attack. He was a spry 30-plus years old, so his death was not shocking, just the way it happened. I was lucky that he dropped at a fortuitous point in his stride and pitched me over one shoulder, clear of his body as it came down and tumbled past. The fall also knocked all the electrical impulses out of him, so he did not do any twitching or thrashing afterward. It was sad, but he died having a good time and did not suffer for a moment. We came back the next day and rolled him into a grassy ditch with permission from the property owners to let him return to nature. The roughest part was getting my saddle off him and carrying it 4 miles back to the trailer. It weighed about 60 pounds with the pad, girths, and other equipment. We ended up fashioning a skid with our lassos, lead ropes, and a tarp, and dragged it behind my friend's mare while we rode double. That poor mare was bewildered and upset. As far as she was concerned, someone had just smote her friend, and we were acting like it was no big deal. Second, I worked at an animal shelter that hosted animal control units for 2 different counties. Because of this, we had a bite ward where animals who had bitten someone were quarantined before being released or euthanized. One summer, a monster of a cane corso named Rocco was brought in after being relocated from Texas due to legal complications involving the legal owner being in prison and the wrong person signing him over to animal control after he had severely injured someone by biting off their arm. While they sorted out the legalities, this 160-pound unneutered, hyper-aggressive mastiff lived in our kennel for months. You could barely look at him without him lunging at the kennel fencing. I had to deal with him to clean his runs, so instead of antagonizing him into the adjacent run like other workers, I threw a lot of high-value treats in there to lure him in. Then I shut the sliding gate between the runs with a lever and cleaned his original run. I spoke kindly to him, avoided eye contact, and gave him many treats. In exchange, he moved into the other run without much asking and did not lunge at the kennel when I came around. One Sunday, when we were closed and only 3 of us were there to clean the dog, cat, and kitten wards, I was power washing runs in the same ward as Rocco. I had headphones in, and the washer was loud, so I did not hear anything. Suddenly, I felt a large, squishy muzzle in my hand at my side. In a heartbeat, my mind went through every dog in the kennel trying to identify the face shape and size. There was only one answer. I took a deep breath before turning to glance down and confirm that it was Rocco. We made brief eye contact, just enough for me to see he was not being actively aggressive but was happy to play whatever game I wanted. If that meant chasing me down and attacking me, that was fine. But he was also okay with me talking kindly and luring him back to his kennel with the entire bag of treats I thankfully had in my fanny pack. I managed to bribe him inside and closed the door before leaving quickly. It turned out he had climbed up and over the 7-foot fence of his run and dropped down. After a brief cry of relief and horror, I got my coworkers, and we put plywood up there and stacked sacks of unwanted dog food donations on top to keep him inside. Needless to say, we kept radios on us even on closed days from then on. Story 60. I have had many difficult experiences, the most recent of which should have been the end for me was 6 weeks ago. I work as a bartender in what is undoubtedly the worst bar in my city. I told someone I would not give them a beer for free and asked them to leave after they screamed at me and argued. An hour later, he returned with a gun and pointed it at me. My security guard finally did his job and tackled him, which caused the gun to go off, with the bullet passing about 6 inches from my head. I almost died that night. The silver lining is that every other troublesome person who comes in now is terrified of me since they did not see me completely spiral and freak out in the days following, as the incident happened on a Friday. Story 61. I had an ectopic pregnancy 18 years ago. The day after they removed the pregnancy and fallopian tube, I felt very ill, could not breathe, and was in excruciating pain. I looked down and saw blood everywhere. I was rushed back into surgery, where they found that during my cesarean section 2 years earlier, the surgeon had misplaced my bladder, and it had been nicked during the removal of the ectopic pregnancy. I had been in agony for 2 years and was dismissed by everyone. Story 62. When I was 16, my friend met a man online who said he was having a party in the canyons and invited her to bring some girls. He met us at a gas station and said it would just be him and another friend. His car windows were tinted, but I could see the silhouettes of figures in the back seat. I had a strange feeling about it, but agreed to follow them up the canyon. As we followed, another car was behind us with its lights off. I told her I did not feel safe and that free alcohol was not worth the risk. We turned around and left. He started calling her repeatedly, upset that we did not follow. A few days later, a report came out that 3 girls had been murdered in that canyon by the men who invited us, as their DNA was found on the victims. There is more detail, but I am keeping this brief. Story 63. I was 7 years old, sweeping dirt off my parents' driveway with a metal broom as a thunderstorm approached in the distance. My brother suddenly yelled at me to drop the broom because my hair was starting to stand up. I vividly remember feeling and possibly hearing static just before throwing the broom down and running. I think I was seconds away from being struck by lightning. My 7-year-old self thought the storm was farther away. My mom was livid. Story 64. When I was a child, several family members told me that my babysitter got into a car accident with me in the car and did not tell my mother that it happened. Unknown to her, I had a bruise on my brain, which I still have. Blood was pooling on my brain and behind my eyes. By the time signs appeared that something was seriously wrong, I was beginning to have seizures. My uncle informed me that I died a few times on the operating table while they were trying to figure out what was going on. Once the babysitter admitted what happened, I continued having seizures, and they struggled to stabilize me. I had a major brain bleed to the point where I coded multiple times. My uncle said, "I thought you were gone, kid." By some miracle, they were able to stabilize me, and I am here. My brain still glitches out from time to time, and I have severe memory issues. I cannot work due to these problems, but I am here. I had a brain scan a while back, and my fiancée saw the bruise on my brain from the incident. The neurologist said it is stable, but I should avoid any hits to my head. I laughed. I endured 14 years of an abusive relationship with my ex-wife. My mother was just as bad, and I am accident-prone. Once, I sneezed and hit myself in the head with a cabinet door. I am not joking. All I was trying to do was grab a cup. So, I do not know how I made it to 33. Story 65. Horseback riding and jumping in wet conditions can be very dangerous. It is one of the closest experiences to the accident Christopher Reeve had. Story 66. When I was 16, I was in an all-terrain vehicle accident. The handlebar of the all-terrain vehicle I was on went through my stomach and shattered my 5th lumbar vertebra. On the way to the ground, I slammed my head and badly fractured my orbital socket. I was flown for life to a children's hospital where they put me back together. I lost 6 inches of intestine, had a replacement vertebra put in my spine, and lost some vision in my left eye. The doctors told me I was 2 millimeters away from rupturing my femoral artery and bleeding out, and 1 centimeter away from hitting my spinal cord straight on, which would have paralyzed me. I also almost lost my left eye due to swelling in my face. I walked away with dropped foot and arthritis in my spine, but I was extremely lucky considering how much worse it could have been. Story 67. I was running on top of brick tables at my school when I was 8 years old. I accidentally slipped and hit the corner of a table. My lower eyelids were cut. The doctor said I was lucky because my eyes were not directly injured upon falling. Story 68. I was about to cross the road at a traffic light after soccer practice. My light was green, but for some reason I remembered the traffic officer from elementary school saying, "Look before you walk, even on a green light." That moment of hesitation and then looking made me see a car speeding down the road running the red light. If I had just walked as I always did, I would have been hit. Story 69. I choked on a piece of barbecue once and felt the air in my lungs decrease each second. It was very painful. I managed to cough it out of my throat, but I still swallowed it anyway. Story 70. I had cancer at age 12 and lost part of my leg. I was fortunate to have cancer again at 42, which paralyzed one of my vocal cords. This occurred within the past year. I would say that I am very lucky. Story 71. I drowned when I was 6. I saw a tunnel and a warm, inviting light drawing me toward it. Just as I was entering, I was pulled out of the water. I was very upset and kept trying to go back in. As an adult, I came extremely close to being crushed in a car accident. I was in the back seat where my friends had heavy equipment, and we were driving next to a concrete barrier. A chain reaction accident involving at least 8 vehicles began around us. A large van came straight toward the side of our car, directly at the backseat area. The driver did some NASCAR-style swerving that somehow avoided every car that was pinballed our way. It was incredible. There was absolutely no way I would have come out of that without life-changing injuries, if I had even survived at all. Luckily, I walked away with only some post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 72. In the late 1980s, someone made a left turn in front of me, and I collided with the car on a motorcycle at 50 miles per hour. I flew off like Superman. Took about 6 months to recover, but I am much better now. Story 73. This was my lucky to be alive moment. Truth be told, I was fortunate to escape with only losing my left leg, as it could have left me paralyzed. I am very grateful about the outcome. Story 74. I once stood up too quickly while getting out of a full bathtub, blacked out, and fell. Luckily, I did not fall into the tub and drown, and I also did not hit anything the wrong way or break my neck or worse. As a child, I once fell through the ice on a frozen lake. Story 75. The parachute failed, and then there was trouble with the reserve parachute, which eventually untangled and deployed just in time before being destroyed. Hearing my skydive instructor scream during free falling at over 200 kilometers per hour toward the earth was a mental experience. Story 76. 2 years ago, my ankle swelled up a bit. I went to the doctor. She told me my blood pressure was high and gave me medication. She said to come back in a week so she could check it. Then she said she was going to do blood work. I went back and she had the regular blood tests done. She called me within 30 hours to tell me to go to the hospital to get them to check my kidneys and to tell them I was anemic. I did. The doctor took a complete blood count test to check my hemoglobin. Came back 15 minutes later. He told me my hemoglobin was extremely low. It was at 5.3. My blood pressure was still high. He told me they would admit me. I saw a kidney specialist. He said he was going to get my blood work checked again and do a urine test. 2 days later, I was told I had stage 5 kidney disease. I was so shocked. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.